What story do you see in this picture? The beauty of a still image is that it freezes time. Am I joyously adorning my big sister with a tiara? Am I being the annoying little brother and trying to take it away from her? I couldn't tell you the answer. I have no memory of this event. Regardless of whether I was proud of her then, I can tell you with certainty that I'm proud of her now. I'm taller than her now, too. It's easy to be proud of someone like Amanda. Full ride to the University of Michigan, full ride to 2 years in the UK for 2 master's degrees, finishing her doctorate a year early at a little tiny school called Harvard, getting ready to start a postdoc at MIT. Those are the things that everyone can see, but I can tell you that that is barely scratching the surface. She does all of this with complete humility and with complete grace. I mean, she has to, since Grace is her middle name. So let's go beneath the surface. I think we did the math one time, but it's like, okay, I lived from July of 2021 to... I'm failing the math. I don't know. Just brain fart. But June of 2023. So that's like 2 full years, right?
Yeah.
And then how many combined months have you lived outside of the US?
Let's see. So I did I think 4-ish, 3 or 4 months. Maybe I'll count as 4. My first time in Hungary. Mm-hmm. And then I did another 5 months my second time in Hungary. So I think it was 9 months in Hungary altogether.
Okay. Hungry baby.
Hungry baby, indeed. And then, let's see, I did 3 months in France. So now we're at a full year. Mm-hmm. And then, depending on if you ask, or, depending on whether we're talking about my legal status or where I actually was.
No. Well, don't worry about the legal status.
All right. Well, I was in the UK from September of 2019, and then I left in October of 2020. It's another year, 0.1, and then I think I came back for a few months at the end.
I'm sorry, I wasn't counting. I remember the hungry baby, 9 months. France was a full year, but then what does the UK add up to?
Yeah, I'm gonna say the UK was maybe 15, 16 months in total. Okay. So I think it's almost 2.5 years.
Yeah, 2 years, 4 months. Okay, so that's the credibility piece. You get the world traveler sticker.
Ethos.
Yeah, but I mean, going all the way back to when you and I were little beans. I mean, it's funny because growing up, obviously having a mom in the hotel industry, it kind of lends itself to traveling. But I mean, I think as time goes on, it's just man, we were really blessed with how much travel we got. Because I have some friends that have still have never been on a plane, and I don't even want that to be I'm better than you. Or it's no statement like that. It's just purely wow, we got that opportunity a lot. But then I also think you and I both get that it's not just a given that it's travel is good and not traveling is bad, because it's I think there is a large sense that it's travel's exciting or exploring, or you get to understand new cultures. But it's when I was in Hawaii in first grade, I don't think I understood the Hawaiian culture better. I mean, that's just eating grilled cheeses. But I don't know, because I can only say this from my perspective, but it seems as you kind of went into your teenage angst, you started to be travel, and you would just read your books. But I don't know, if you always traveling, as through childhood and adolescence, or if you had any thoughts kind of while you were going through it.
Yeah, I feel we definitely were very lucky to get to travel as kids, because I think, if you don't do that as kids, that it almost feels inaccessible, even if it turns out to not be, or you can travel pretty cheaply. There was a time in Europe where you could just get plane tickets for $10.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think just kind of opening up that door was really important when we were young. Um, and then yeah, I guess kind of growing into like traveling more, I don't know, more meaningfully in some sense. Or yeah, I
Hmm.
agree that like if you just go somewhere for a week and your main like goal is just I want a vacation and I want to relax and yeah, eat food, then there's not much you'll get out of it. Honestly, I don't know if like I've gotten that much out of like any short trips. Like, it's very cool to get to like see things and you kind of
Hmm.
can learn about like different traditions in a short amount of time. So there are like benefits I think to short travels, but it is maybe a significant difference between whether you're there for like a few weeks or a few months. Where
Right.
you
Yeah.
can actually like start to make friends there of like people who have lived there their
Hmm.
entire lives.
Right.
Um,
But like while fully acknowledging that like that isn't necessarily like an open door for everyone, people are kind of cemented in, their jobs and things like that, and it's kind of out of necessity
right.
that they don't really have that luxury. So it's like it's interesting where it's like I think like if you like look back on both of our lives and like, the blessing that we did have to travel like we did, like it's not really a surprise, to anyone that it's like we ended up traveling kind of as we started navigating adulthood, but it's still like it wasn't something that I was really planning. But I mean, I think even though both of our traveling, so to speak, was kind of school related, I mean, I think we both had like pretty like different experiences of it because like you said, it's a very like traveling is kind of the umbrella, like going to a place that you are not currently at. Like, okay, that's like the most broad definition, but like most of your traveling, if any, like it hasn't been vacation. Like, so like, I mean, I know like kind of on the basis like well it's school related, but like I actually don't think I understand like exactly like what like how your traveling unfolded or like how your mindset like was it something that you set out to do or was it purely just kind of like placed in your lap?
Um, I think earlier on it was something that I had set out to do.
Hmm.
So I think, like, I guess for you it was maybe a little bit less of a choice, but something that it sounds like you were kind of more open to and talking about
Yeah.
before you headed off to Rome. But I think similarly, like the default is not to go to Hungary or to go to the UK. These are things that sort of I chose to like apply for
Yeah.
and try and do. So yeah, I think like that was kind of coming out of a desire of yeah like seeing more of the world because I feel like I hadn't actually like even though we had done a lot of traveling as kids, I had there's still a lot that I hadn't seen.
Hmm.
And then just like yeah having kind of a new experience a little bit different from um the constant like stress and pressure of being on campus
Hmm.
as an undergrad.
Yeah, because I mean that was something that was relatively like new to me when you visited a couple weeks ago. You're talking about like the stress of undergrad. Like, yes, I know that like I highly regard those who major in math as being I think one of the most difficult disciplines to major in. But like when we were at like University of Michigan and like walking towards like the Natural History Museum, you were saying that like an all nighter once a week was standard, and then the other nights were like 2 to 3 a.m. That's crazy. So like was going to Hungary kind of like a reprieve from that?
Yeah, I think it was definitely like, yeah, just a break from the culture because I feel like the
Hmm.
mindset of people there, granted, a lot of people were there just kind of to, like, I want to go on vacation for a few months, but that was a kind of I think, a good influence on me.
Right.
To have people who were a bit more laid back because I do feel like yeah it was very intense in Michigan. I think some of it was that there was just a lot to do and I think some of it was kind of just the culture around the
Hmm.
department I was in was like everyone was pulling all-nighters and like the professors were there all night and so
The professors
so
were?
yeah well some of them
That's crazy
um
though.
but yeah, like there was the
Man.
class where I had like 10 p.m. office hours because they knew that everyone would be staying up all night to finish the homework. So you like go to those 10 p.m. office hours to get hints, and then you can't even like really get started on the homework until like 11 when those
You
are
math
done.
people just confuse me in subject matter and lifestyle. It just confuse me. Gosh. But yeah, so obviously like yeah, like you kind of had to apply for Hungary, so it's not like this big surprise and like it's kind of cool that it's just like who would expect Hungary? I think you said it's like the second best math program in the world behind like Russia or something like that. Or it
Yeah,
was.
I think they're. I don't know if I could like quite rank them because I don't know as much about the Russian one. But yeah, there's really only like two big study abroad program specifically for math, and it's in Hungary and Russia.
Okay, okay. So then, yeah, you got to learn your Hungarian. So like, yeah, so your first stint there, like, you say 3 to 4 months, we'll say 4 months. Like, I mean, again, like, I kind of, like, I remember, like, you know, like, kind of, I guess not FaceTiming because you're not an Apple user, but, you know, Skyping you, I think is what it was. Or Facebook Messenger, whatever it was. Like, and, like, you know, you kind of get, like, oh, yeah, this, and this. But, like, I kind of know that there's kind of, like, from my experience, there's kind of, like, the external, like, kind of the details that you say of, like, oh, yeah, you know, I got to see this, like, I traveled here. But, like, I don't think I've actually ever gotten, like, a real, like, pulse on, like, what was that like for you kind of, like, emotionally? Like, was it, like, hardship and, like, feeling lost, or was it, like, kind of independent, like, here we go? Because I know that, you know, kind of all of us in the family really have, like, an independent streak a lot of the time.
Yeah, I feel like it was actually pretty smooth. All the times that I've gone abroad, or like not too much like culture shock or things. I think in particular for this like Hungary program, they like really put a lot of work into introducing us to like the language and the culture the first few weeks. So like there's not even math classes the first few weeks. Like you go and take a Hungarian language class, and they like kind of tell you about all like the little like difference in culture, and like they have like, you know, someone who's sort of just in charge of student welfare and introducing everyone. So it felt very much like I wasn't alone in the process the first time, and especially too because it's a program with a bunch of Americans going to Hungary. It was something where it kind of came, or it was all of us coming from the same background, or similar backgrounds, and then, you know, kind of trying to learn about this new culture. So I think we all had kind of companionship in
yeah. It's like it's something I couldn't really quite understand, like moving to a new country and like for instance, if you move to like France and like living as a French person does, like you're in your own apartment in a French, you know, apartment building. That's like, I can't even like begin to like imagine that. So it's like, I think for you and me both, it's like, yes, there is the sense of living abroad, but you're living abroad with Americans, you know. So I live with Americans and a couple Australians, and it's like, yeah, like there's definitely like an easing into it, and I guess like yours was probably more specifically designed as like a study abroad program. I wouldn't really even call mine a study abroad program. Like it was just a school that I went to that was in Rome because, you know, the specific discipline that I was in, like theology, like you kind of go to the heart of it, like where it is in Rome. I would say it's probably even like more strongly focused than something like math, because it's like you can find great math, you know, programs all across the United States and elsewhere, but it's like Rome is kind of, you know, heart of the church and all of that. So for me, like it was like, I would say like the first 48 hours was like an actual like depression. Like I was like so confused and like overwhelmed, and like I mean the whole thing of like, because I mean that was also your first time flying to Europe, right? Was when you went to Hungary? Yeah, so it's like, okay, you do the whole thing where it's like your flight leaves at like 6 p.m. Michigan time, and then you know, you arrive at 9 a.m. and they're like, hey, like it's almost like prison guards, like, hey, like don't go to sleep, you're gonna mess everything up, you go to sleep. So it's like you do like a full day on the plane, well, not day, but like, you know, 12 hours or whatever, and you don't get very much sleep, and then, well, maybe you do because you get better sleep than I do on transportation, but then like it's this whole thing. But it's just, I think it's overwhelming. Like I think you probably could speak similarly here. Like it wasn't so much that I was like physically separated from people, because I think you and I have really cultivated like kind of long distance communication, and, you know, already like kind of having our immediate family, but then extended family like spread out all over the place. It wasn't really like this thing where you got, you know, little Timmy, you know, your 10-year-old, you know, baby brother, like grabbing at your ankles being like, Amanda, don't go to Hungary, it's so mean, you know. But it's like there's still something of like, yeah, it's just it's very new. And I mean, for both of us going to school in the same state relatively, you know, within a 1 hour radius our whole lives, it's just like there's something different. Well, I guess I can't say that for you because you're Florida, but I don't know if you remember that much of Florida.
I don't remember anything of Florida.
Yeah. But like, you know, for me, like getting like 2 years a 2 year go at it. I think if I only did like 4 months or 6 months, like I think it would have been primarily a negative experience. I would say like my first year was categorized or characterized much more by like negative experience than positive experience. Like I look back at like my own journaling and things like that, and it's like, yeah, there's kind of like these exciting things, and I'm kind of getting this attention from people that otherwise would not really care. But like that's the external, the hype, I guess, of like being abroad. But like for me, like I felt like a real black sheep because like you said, like once you get over to Europe, the plane tickets are cheap, and so you kind of are expected to go around. Like I had to cultivate like such a strong sense of home before like I could even like enjoy any sort of travel. I remember like the first real opportunity we had to travel, like after we did the language school and then we did a month additional of language school in Rome, and then just like finally like we do this big ordination and everyone goes off, and I just felt so pressured to do that. Like I remember like one of the guys I was with was kind of like speaking sarcastically. He's like, "Yeah, I could just be sent to Rome and like not go see all of Italy." And it's just like I was like, "That's what I'm saying," but like not sarcastically, like like all of that. And so I ended up like I like kind of went into this room where all these guys were planning this trip to France, and like I bailed like 30 minutes. I was like, "I'm sorry, guys, this is just too overwhelming." I ended up staying in Rome, and I just really felt like a loser because I was like, "Well, I'm not like doing these like really like picturesque photogenic travels, all this stuff." Like it was weird because again, like you said, if you're not there for a week and you kind of have to set more of a sense of permanence, like it made me feel like inadequate or strange that it's like, oh, I didn't want to travel. But I don't know, like if because you knew you were going to be there for 4 months, if you kind of fast tracked yourself to doing more of those things, or if you shared any like similar sentiments.
Yeah, I think there's definitely yeah, sort of a change in mindset
Hmm.
between whether like yeah, you're there for, you know, an unknown number of years
Yeah.
in the future, but at least a few years.
Hmm.
And so yeah, then it's like really important to kind of actually like have strong friendships and like yeah, kind of a strong foot in the place that you're at. Versus yeah, if like especially for the times that I was there for short amounts of time, like even though it didn't feel like it was a vacation, it also didn't feel like it was home in the
Hmm.
sense that I still had a place back in the U.S. to kind of
Yeah.
move back into at any point. Um, and so yeah, I don't know if I experienced that same level of dread. I feel like actually one thing that kind of happened, but that maybe is more of a short term than a long term phenomenon, is kind of this, the classic FOMO,
Aw.
of like everyone else's life is kind of like all my friends and family and stuff, like all their lives are kind of going on, and then I'm just like gone for 3-4 months, and then
Uh-huh.
kind of jump back in and like hope that things will just
Yeah, that hit me
happen
really
naturally.
strong. Like it was like it's obviously the case that this is wrong what I'm about to say, but like I kind of thought that like life was going to be on pause for 5 years, and then when I get back, it'd be like, oh, you can just kind of pick up. But then like when I see, yeah, that like things are progressing, whether I'm there or not, that was really like a hard grappling with the idea of like agency. Like, do I actually like make a difference? And that really happened with like Ted, like my best friend. It's like, oh, like now he's like dating this person, and she's now kind of getting incorporated into the friend group, and they're having these Christmas parties and Easter parties. That was a really tough time. Like I was on a train in Germany at like 2 a.m. like Easter, like yeah, I think it was Easter evening, and I was like trying to like FaceTime in, and it was just a mess because you're traveling, and so you keep on going like in and out of signal. I felt so like disconnected, and like yeah, like I think maybe what I started like because you were in the UK for longer term, that stuff was probably present, but it's also like at that point it also wasn't your first time doing that, so you kind of had that experience of it. Well, like I'm kind of like, I guess I never really talked to you about this, but like, why did you choose Hungary again? I mean, I guess in some sense, if there's only two programs, then Hungary again. But like, was it really like you felt there was unfinished business there? You just really liked it, and so you wanted to kind of go around too?
Yeah, I guess I was pretty torn between like I knew I kind of wanted to get out of Michigan. I think I was getting pretty burnt out by
Mm.
like I guess this was maybe the second semester of my junior year.
Yeah.
That I went back. But yeah, I was pretty torn between like Hungary and Russia. Like I remember one of my professors said like, oh, like you should go to Hungary if you want a vacation and you should go to Russia otherwise. Which again, I don't know if that's actually the relation between these two programs. I mean, this professor helped run the Russia program for context.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah,
Jeez.
so potentially some bias there. But anyways, I think I ultimately ended up choosing Hungary because it felt like I could kind of assimilate there a little bit quicker. Like, you know, I had a really good experience my first time, and I was a little bit, like not, even though the actual process of like kind of, learning how to live there didn't take like forever. It does take a lot of time and a lot of effort. And so I kind of just wanted to like jump into it the second time around. And I do think that worked out pretty well. And so, yeah, I guess it was mostly just that I wanted to be away, but like not have to go through the whole process of
that
learning.
makes a lot of sense. That's
again.
almost like a practical point there. Because how much time passed in between the first Hungary stint ended and the second one started? Was it a year or like less than that?
About like a year and a half, I would say. Yeah. But yeah, it hadn't been that long, and yeah, it did feel like there was still a lot that I could do there and enjoy, because I don't think I traveled around that much my first time that I was there, and so that was also the time that I like did a lot more exploring around Europe.
Yeah. So I think like at that point, like the fact that you went study abroad twice is maybe a little bit strange, but I guess the fact that you studied abroad in undergraduate isn't like necessarily the most unique thing to do. But then like I think once you graduate from U of M, and like it's still so crazy to me that it's like, okay, you were full ride there. You probably could have graduated in like 2 years, 2.5 years, but you wanted to like take full advantage of that, and you know, you did the 4 years. But like, you know, you told me that like you had friends that straight out of undergrad are working these really, you know, kind of big glamorous jobs, and then you choose to do this program for like through the UK, and you get a full ride for that. And I think maybe you've described it this way before. Maybe this is just me putting words in your mouth, but you just kind of got like 2 master's degrees for fun. I don't think that's probably necessarily a fair way to put it, but like what, like, you know, so you have these close friends that are like obviously not going that path, but like what was your kind of thought process or your like discernment into like choosing to go that route versus just entering the workforce?
Yeah, I think well, okay, I guess maybe there's sort of 3 options here, because there's like entering the workforce or like going straight to a PhD in the US.
Yeah, I guess that you can clarify is that the way it works in the math world. I don't know how many other disciplines this works, but it's like you don't go undergrad and then master's and then PhD. You start your 5-year PhD program right after undergrad.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of, it's maybe more of a US versus other countries thing than it is like field dependent, though it might be also somewhat field dependent.
Sure.
But yeah, it's because like in the US PhD programs are typically 5 years, whereas like in Europe and a lot of other places, there's a 3-year PhD program, and then you'll do like a 1 or 2 year master's.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually pretty similar to theology in Rome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in some sense, like, it's just that a U.S. PhD program often includes a master's. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, actually now I technically have 3 masters just because I clicked the button.
Can you get one from Harvard?
Yeah. You just click a button and you say, I want a master's. And
that's right. That's right. I should click that button. What am I doing?
Yeah. But yeah, it wasn't quite that I was going there just for fun. I do feel like I wanted a bit more time before like kind of getting down into just doing PhD research, which is sort of like settling down in one place for 5 years and kind of focusing on like one problem, because I feel like there was still a lot of gaps in my like mathematical knowledge that I wanted to fill. So I was like, oh, okay, if I go and do this like sort of course-based program in the UK, then that'll give me a chance to like learn some of these topics better. And so I do feel like it made me a little bit more well-rounded as a mathematician. But then also just as a person, you know, I did really enjoy my times in Hungary, and I feel like just kind of that experience of like moving around and making like a whole new set of friends, and like kind of a whole new set of experiences. Like I did rowing for the first time, which I feel like is something I just never would have tried unless I was like thrown into
the athlete
a very
of the family.
yeah, something like that. But yeah, just kind of being thrown into these very new environments, I feel like can, at least for me, encourages me to like try new things and kind of reevaluate like, yeah, what is it that I want to be doing with my life and my time. And so I think I kind of just felt I wanted that reset in like a shorter term version than like settling down for a PhD.
Yeah. Because, I mean, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but, like, once you start your PhD work, like, you're not really attending classes the same way that you would be in a master's program. Like, it's mostly independent at that point.
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting, because it's like, you know, me being, like, a complete, like, peon in the math world, like, getting a 2 on, like, the AP Calc exam, you know, I'm like, oh, like, you know, you graduated from University of Michigan in the math program. Like, how could you have any gaps in your knowledge? But it's like, I mean, you know yourself better than, you know, anyone else does, and so that's really commendable. I actually didn't know that there was like that sort of flavor to it, you know. It wasn't just for fun, but it's actually like kind of taking stock and reflection and self-inventory and all that stuff, which I'm a big fan of. But yeah, that's,
and I don't know
really
if it's cool. Yeah, and I don't know if it's like this in theology too, but like I feel like in math, you know, there's just always more that you can be doing, like even though there's sort of like some core topics, yeah, there's like so many things that you could be studying, and I think the older, like more experience you get in the field, the less likely you are to just like sit down and take a class, and so you're sort of depending on that like early knowledge.
Right, yeah, you have the most kind of like flexibility and like plasticity actually, like at this point. So then I guess kind of reflecting afterwards on your 15 months, I mean, it was characterized by COVID and all this stuff, but do you think like kind of that initial choice that we just talked about to do that, you know, back in 2019, I think, yeah, did it kind of fulfill what you were looking for it to fulfill?
That's a good question. I think like yes and no. You know, maybe it fulfilled sort of my own ideas of what I was going to do there, but then maybe, you know, kind of because I went with this like particular, you know, UK like government fellowship, and you know they had a bunch of big talk about we're going to be ambassadors between the US and the UK, and I don't know if I got to that standpoint.
Yeah, you don't drive like a Mini Cooper with like the British flag on top of it. What the heck?
No, yeah. Yeah, there were also like some of the people who had gone previously were like, oh yeah, like all your professors, like, you know, they're not going to have office hours in their office. They're all going to go to the pub and do office hours there. Like that was not my experience. But I do feel like it did fulfill, the sort of, kind of replanting of my roots in a different place. You know, I think I did make a lot of really good friends, that first year when I was in Cambridge. And then, yeah, sort of a lot of unexpected things happened with the pandemic. And so, yeah, that was like the second year was sort of much maybe less fulfilling in terms of like making new friends and like having a new circle of people, because I was moving to I'd moved to a new university, and like we were under very strict lockdown, so I could only really interact with like the 5 other people who lived in my like little dorm hall, and
your
that got a little sad.
Siblings.
They weren't even like they were all different like fields and things like this. So
still so disrespectful to even use that term, academic siblings. You know, what am I to you? Unbelievable.
Well, you're my real sibling. You're not an academic sibling.
Golly, I don't know. So then, okay, so like, yes, like the UK kind of mixed bag, kind of still in that realm of travel, but travel, you know, you're quarantined just in a different location. Again, like, you know, we're kind of like, I guess in my mind, again, math peon, like you're still kind of building things up, do a couple year program, yeah. But then like, okay, so like we're walking now towards the PhD in Harvard, but then it's just like the travel now, which like I want to get to eventually, but first just like, okay, what you could have called it quits here. It's like, okay, I got my two master's degrees, enter and kind of now like put the math to work purely like for like utility, to like earn a pretty high wage. Because I mean, like you've talked about, like you said you had that like one friend that like kind of used math within the trading world, was making like something like north of like $600,000 or something like that. So it's like
That's my academic sibling.
oh, okay, whatever. But so it's like, okay, there's all of this opportunity out there, but it's just like, I think I've hinted at this to you, but like I seriously like admire, because it almost seems like, and I don't want to like denigrate those who enter that, because I'm sure that they're like in high agency roles and like fulfilling very needed roles, but it's like there's something that seems like you're like more of a pure dedication to the discipline, and it's more of like the theoretical abstract versus like the utilitarian practical would kind of be like how my like philosophy mind categorizes it. But like it seems like you continuing to kind of progress down this road of academia, it's like that doesn't you're taking less, I would say, like glamorous, but also like just less paying roles in some regards, purely out of like the discipline of it. And I remember we were talking a little bit about that, the arboretum, about like that choice. But am I kind of like hitting the mark there, and I don't want, like, because I know that you're so humble about it. I don't want you to like, get on your grand stage and be like, yeah, look at all these like sellouts out there. But I mean, like, it seems like it takes a certain amount of sacrifice to commit to the pure discipline of mathematics.
Yeah, it definitely, is certainly monetarily a really big trade-off.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, I do think that like, especially in a lot of STEM fields, and most people who choose to stay in academia could probably go to like a trading firm or something and just be making like 5 times your salary. But yeah, you do lose a lot of kind of control in what you work on when you do that. So I think for some people, like maybe the problems that they're most interested in are actually the ones that companies care about. And so maybe some people kind of end up in the lucky position where they get to do exactly the work they want to be doing, and also they're making a ton of money for it. But I think at least for the kinds of things I'm interested in, I like having sort of that freedom and like being on my own kind of deadlines. And so in academia, yeah, you do like really give up a lot of the kind of monetary perks in order to have that freedom. And I think it's something where, yeah, like most of my friends from Michigan are now kind of in these like high paying positions. But I think there's like a varying degree of sort of how much of a trade-off each person has made. So like, some people can go and work for like, I don't know, maybe I'll be calling out specific people here, but some people can go work for like Facebook, or like Google, or and other like really big name tech companies. But maybe like that's less of like a passion choice and more of a like those are the companies that will pay you the most. But then I also have like friends who work in AI ethics, where like they're sort of trying to stop big AI from doing terrible things to the world.
Are they succeeding?
And hopefully, we'll see. But yeah, they're I think they're probably making a little bit less money than they would if they were to trade off to some other company with less moral values. But they do also make more than academics do, for sure.
Yeah. So it's a spectrum. There's kind of varying degrees to it. And like, if you think back to like freshman year at U of M, or even like maybe like senior year of Seaholm, do you think like that version of you would have expected to go down the academia route, or were you really unsure and then just like the UK was one more step towards that and then Harvard was another step towards that?
I think like maybe by senior year in high school I was still pretty unsure, because at that point I wanted to do like math biology, and that's something
Until you
that
threw
sort
a
of maybe
tantrum
lends
in your
itself.
lab.
Yeah, so until I rage quit biology after my first experience in college.
After telling the PA that he's wrong when he was wrong.
Yeah. Still gets me going to this day. Um, but yeah, I think, maybe senior year of high school, I was less sure because I also didn't really know what it meant to be an academic. Like, I had some experiences with college professors when I had, like, gone to take classes at, like, local colleges during high school, but, like, I didn't really get to see very, very much until what that lifestyle is like. Like, what does it mean to be an academic?
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's not one of like the main things that they tell you about when they're talking about like career options to kids.
Yeah, it's just teacher, but it's like grade school, high school. It's not that.
Yeah, it's kind of a different vibe. But yeah, I'll say by like maybe my freshman year, sort of when I started like kind of getting to see what academic life is a bit more and realizing that was something that I was interested in. And so I think probably from that point onward, I was pretty set on being an academic. Yeah, I feel like I, maybe less so than most people in like in my field, kind of just wasn't interested in experimenting with like trying out companies. Whereas like a lot of people will do like one summer internship or something at least just to see what the other side is like.
Right, but I mean even like your time like in the summers in like Duluth, like that wasn't really like an internship to like pad your resume. It was more just kind of interacting with the field that you loved, right?
Right, yeah, it's basically like it's a research program, so you're just doing like academic research for a summer.
Yeah. Wow. Our professional nerd.
Yeah.
So, like, I guess... Well, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask you, I guess for you, like, was there a time when you ever thought about, like, academia being an option, or never really?
Here's kind of the, really peeling it open. For being, I would say, like, quite good at school, but, like, kind of the game of school. Like, I think I've been, like, blessed, and I was talking to one of my friends, actually, a couple weeks ago about this, on, like, a different podcast, but, like, just, like, you don't do anything to, like, deserve, like, your intelligence, or, like, the IQ that, you were assigned, so to speak. But it's, like, because I had those gifts, it's just, like, I was able to kind of navigate my way through school, and I guess, like, impress people by academic performance. I was never really that passionate of an academic. I think you and I are actually like quite different in that regard. But I think I also probably am more like passionate about like knowledge and like the learning process more than most people. But in terms of like academics, like there was kind of like the grind of high school. I still think high school was the hardest academic experience I had, just in terms of hours and things like that, being in the AP classes. Like, I think after that, like, if you're rating it purely on, like, a rigor scale, like, it was quite low, especially in undergrad. And in the way it was in, like, the theology system in Rome, it's like, it could be very rigorous if you did all of the reading. Like, the sky's the limit. You're speaking with the world experts. Like, my teacher for, like, one of my classes was, like, the leading expert on like the book of Deuteronomy, like one of the books in the Bible. Like, so people all around the world, when they have a question about like what is written there, they go to this guy. The other guy was the Pope's advisor on AI. So it's like, you have all these things. So you have, the ceiling is very high, the bar is very low. I mean, your entire semester is rated off of a 10-minute oral exam, and you can just kind of smooth talk your way through a lot of it, like without actually knowing much. Like if you asked me like this question I didn't know about like the Trinity, I could kind of be like, well, like, we read in the Bible that like, this is what it says about God, and like we can just kind of understand like how that pours into our lives, and like I've just been really like edified by like hearing what you said in class, like all this stuff where it's just like you can kind of pull the wool over a bit if I'm being completely honest. So like just to give a little bit of context, like I fully acknowledge that like the ceiling was very high in Rome. I probably took advantage of the ceiling being that high in like 4, maybe 5 classes out of the probably like 45 or 50 classes that I took. Like I didn't take advantage of it. And like when I get an opportunity to either like kind of play the game and like do the minimum, or like really like academically soar, I definitely naturally gravitate towards like doing the minimum. Like all my friends in high school kind of talk about like, memorize, regurgitate, repeat. Like that's just kind of how it is. And it's like, a lot of people were cheating in high school, but like you have the people that like cheat at the bottom because like they're trying to boost their grade they couldn't get otherwise. Like all of us that were like, kind of like valedictorian, like salutatorian, like at the top, it's just like you do it purely as like an exercise in laziness. It's not that you don't want to do that. You're just trying to like sift through like what's the busy work and what's the real thing. And so I think unfortunately like that kind of characterized it, but I don't want to say it's just a passive thing. I definitely like poured into that too, where I would say like it felt like a lot of school up until college was just like taking advantage, but just kind of like applying my intelligence. But there wasn't a ton of like active desire of learning going on. And even in undergrad, that was hard. I like my like second semester sophomore year, I had my best semester ever where like I was in 4 classes that I was very interested in. And so I did a ton of outside reading. I like started taking my own notes, and like otherwise like it was just kind of floating through it. And like I kind of really realized that in Rome, because like you have the professors, but then you have all of these students that it's like, wow, like I'm in Rome. And like sometimes there's like people that kind of get weird about that, where they're like, oh, like this must mean that like I'm really smart. And it's like, here I am, and it's like, I'm not putting in all that much effort, honestly. And like I'm just like, you're not actually that, like you're not applying your knowledge. It's just some of these like kind of tricks of like, using big words or confusing language, and then people assume that confusing language means that you're like, more than they do and all this stuff. So I mean, I don't want it to sound too pessimistic, but I guess I am kind of sounding pessimistic here. But I guess like one thing to clarify is like, I think part of why like I wasn't very invested academically was because like I was so invested in like the spiritual side of it, but then also like the growth of just being abroad. Like that was a much more important experience for me, and just kind of like making relationship over there, and meeting lifelong friends and things like that. So yeah, like again, I think I don't give myself enough credit, because I still do think that like one of like my fundamental things is that like I love to learn, and like I've kind of soireed in a lot of different fields, whether it be like being the head of the barber shop, or like being an organist now, or like dabbling in art, like guitar and all this stuff. So it's like I like that, but I guess I think mainly from my experience in high school, I get a little bit discouraged about the enterprise of like when learning exits the stage and like busyness or like metrics enter the stage.
Yeah, it does. It does also make me wonder too, like, kind of how much that like high school experience sort of could have changed, or like I guess maybe like more so like your attitude towards like becoming an academic might change if like you had more freedom in like what you were learning and how you spent your time.
Yeah, well, I think like I really like, I don't want it to sound like scapegoaty, where it's like, oh man, like like high school did this to me, like I'm just kind of like along for the ride. Like I think I very much stepped into that, but like so I don't think it's like, I think maybe you and I have like a different definition of academics, because like academic is kind of like a negative term for me, because it's kind of characterized by all this busy work and like like the weeder classes in college, where it's like we're not going to see a quarter of you next week or something like that. But it's like I think like I really had to cultivate, partly because like I've been moving around all these different places, of just like personal learning. Like I think the best analogy that I have for that is that like I never really took piano lessons. It was all through YouTube and like kind of like self-motivation, and that's exactly where I needed to be. Like I used to think, I was like, man, like I just wish that like mom signed us up for piano lessons, and then I wouldn't have to be starting this journey in 2019 when I'm already like 21 years old or something like that. Like I wish I could have just gotten on board with it quicker. But it's like I think it's a real big exercise in like knowing myself, where it's like, oh, like no, I actually like I needed this to be self-motivated, or else I would have just given up on it, because there's so many people out there that were forced to take piano lessons 1st through 8th grade, and then they almost like kind of like whenever they see a piano, it's just like this thing that like invokes like this fear, or like these reminders of like past experiences of like bad recitals and things like that. So yeah, like I think now that I'm understanding it a little bit more, it's like I think your definition of academic, like someone who's like in desire of like like the knowledge of like truth versus like its utility. I think yeah, I'm like exactly there, and it's like I think in what I'm doing now, like I think there's a lot of ways in which I touch upon that, but it's just it's lived out. I would say in a little bit less defined of a way now for me versus for you. It's like a bit more obvious on paper for most people that it's like yes, you are an academic because like you're about to finish like a Harvard PhD.
But yeah, I think you've got a good point that there's yeah all these classes and yeah, like, as you say, like weeder classes and things like
Mm-hmm.
this. Like it is somehow viewed as like a necessary step in order to be like, on paper an academic.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pretty hard to like kind of come in to academia from like some side route where you didn't do all that.
Mm-hmm.
But it isn't actually, I think, what's like the skills that are used in like doing research. Because yeah, doing research feels much more like the self-motivated kind of version of things where like, there's not classes on the things that I actually need to think about most of the time. I just, have to like learn it on my own or talk to people and ask them for help. But yeah, it's a lot of like solo work. It's not sitting in a classroom doing like homework exercises. Like I haven't done a homework exercise in
Yeah.
who knows how
Well,
long.
that still blows my mind.
Huh?
That's like where it really like highlights like the gas my own knowledge because like I think all the way back when you're in the UK, like still the thing that stands out to me the most is like because I kind of do like my like check-ins where it's like okay, you got to explain to me like I'm a 5-year-old, like what are you working on right now? And the one where you said like I'm discovering new shapes and hypothetical dimensions, like that's a pretty like mind-blowing like thought in itself. But then like I still kind of have my preconceived notion. So it's like, oh, this is like a homework exercise where it's like, you get your worksheet and it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, draw your 6 shapes. And then your professor's like, oop, that looks like a good shape. Oh no, that one actually doesn't exist in a hypothetical dimension. But like when you're like, no, like I am like the person doing this, like trailblazing. That's just like, that's a very like exciting thing. It's like almost like a cartographer, like Lewis and Clark, like going into like a new uncharted territory.
Yeah, it is. It is a cool feeling to like be like, oh, here's all my little polytopes. I called them all my babies
Yeah.
when I was finding them. But like it just they kind of it does feel like you have some like special connection with them because you're like the first person who sort of noticed that they have these properties. And there's all this like philosophy of like, oh, are we inventing math or are we discovering math? But I think either way.
Oh yeah, that's interesting actually.
If
Yeah,
you're the
yeah.
first one to see it. Yeah, you get this like connection.
Is it all just hidden within, underneath the earth? You just got to dig it out, or is it like generative creation? What side do you take?
Mm, I feel like it depends. I think like there are certain things that are kind of inherent or yeah somehow like fundamentally part of the math. But then I think a lot of the structures that we build around how we think about it and like what language we use for it, I think that's all generative.
Yeah, kind of creative. That makes sense. I like that. Wow.
Yeah, I don't think anyone like just invented two. I think that's something we discovered maybe.
Wow. Well, maybe you can invent a new number at some point.
Maybe.
So what do you like? This might be too big of a question to ask, but like, okay, so you're hoping to like kind of graduate in the upcoming months and then kind of go into postdoc, but that I mean you're kind of outside of school as a student, I would say. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's very fair to say.
Okay, so then like, so obviously like because you're in this world of research where like if I draw like kind of the spectrum between like kind of crystallized like already done work and you just kind of gotta carry the baton, do your part. I would say, this kind of generative, creative, like chaotic world, like you're very much on this side of like, yes, like the research is discovering and exploring these shapes and you don't have a map or you don't have a script to go in. So that like I'm asking this like in full appreciation of how kind of chaotic and like undiscovered, some of this stuff is. But like I guess looking at, the start of your kind of role as being a professional now, what would you hope like kind of at the end of like your quote unquote like career to have done? Like would it just be to like do as pure research as you could have? Are you kind of hoping for like, a big discovery? Are you looking in terms of like altruistic things of like hopefully this, helps something and like, cures cancer, like something something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of have um two hopes for my career.
Hmm.
I think, yeah, research wise, I think I just want to be like working on interesting things,
Hmm.
and like not be too stuck for too long. There's some people who will be stuck on a problem for like 7 years and maybe they'll solve it and maybe they won't. But I
Oh
think
my
I just want to
god.
like kind of
Well, I would get frustrated when like we start doing like proofs and like trigonometry and it would take like 5 minutes instead of like 30 seconds.
it's really really building up the endurance. So yeah, I mean, I think it's more standard for most projects to be on the order of like months to like a few years,
Hmm.
a couple of years, but maybe longer than that is kind of very extended, especially if you're putting all your focus toward it. So I think I want to stay more on the side of like, yeah, kind of continually like engaging with other researchers and like working on important things. But I don't think I need to have like a big breakthrough in order to feel fulfilled in my career.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think this is something where okay, maybe actually I have three goals. I'll add one.
Ooh.
So yeah, I want to continue enjoying my own research, but it doesn't have to like hit a particular peak. I just want to be able to keep doing it.
Yeah.
For someone to keep paying me enough to live to do it.
You live at the
um,
Michigan Arboretum and do your math.
exactly. Um, yeah, then I think my second goal is maybe more on the altruistic side, but like less so. I don't believe the kind of research I do is going to have like realized applications
Hmm.
in my lifetime, at least, if ever.
Hmm.
But I do think there's a lot of good that can be done kind of in the academic world, because yeah, there is a lot of sort of like social like bias and hierarchy, and it's like a very kind of like white and Asian male dominated field. And so, yeah, I think just kind of working to build more kind of equality, equity into the
Yeah, well, because
field,
it's like
and
it's
kind
like
of opening up.
posterity of it too. Like, I think of like Van Gogh. Like I think that's like the best image of it. That's really cool. Where it's like, they I think there's a quote where it's like wisdom is planting a tree, knowing that you'll never see it grow into like full size. And I think this quote's kind of from the perspective of an old person, but like knowing that like in 30 years, someone's going to like enjoy the shade of it.
Right, right.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I think kind of planting some of those seeds. I'm hoping that at least some of that altruistic work will actually have noticeable differences in the meantime. But I do think like yeah, the ultimate goal is to have kind of the culture around it
Hmm.
shift over over large periods of time, and then maybe sort of similar to this on an altruistic level is just like also teaching cool math to new
Yeah.
students.
Cool math
just
games.
just getting to share that. Yeah.
Do you know about cool math games?
I know about cool math games.
Okay.
Who
Well,
doesn't know
well,
about cool
yeah. I
math
mean, it was like
games?
something that we did in grade school, but then like when I was teaching third grade, they're like, "Mr. Burcroft, we go on cool math games." I was like, you can't do that to me. Like, I'm not that old. Like, I know I was around like for cool math games. Like, get out of here. Yeah, because I mean, we didn't even talk about that, but it's like you've done a lot of work with like youth, but like tutoring, but also like mentoring programs. So you think the world would be a better place if everyone was better at math?
Well, I think it's less about like getting people to be like better at math, but I
Hmm.
think it's more that if people enjoy it, then I want them to be able to keep learning it.
Hmm.
And also, yeah, maybe like I think the world would be better if people knew more different math. In that, I think it's very routine, and yeah, it's kind of like this universally hated subject
Yeah, that is a good
among
point. It
a
is
lot of people.
universally hated. Like you're always going to get kind of well, I don't know what the term is. Like you're always going to get approval if you just say something bad about math. Like, oh man, math, who needs it? And oh, every teacher in the '90s that said you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket. Like, ugh, like, but yeah, it is. It's like this unfortunate like byproduct of reality. But it's like people don't understand how like fundamental like the number like one is. Like, how do you even like take inventory of anything like without like quantity? There's my philosophy take on it.
Fair enough. Yeah, and it feels, it also feels in some sense kind of philosophical in that. Like the most important things are really the questions. Like you start to think about, yeah, what does one mean? Like what properties does it have? Like what is it like can I have, back before people like had zero, it's like, oh, what happens if I take away this many things from this many
Yeah,
things?
who invented zero? I
That
feel
is
like I remember when we were like on vacation in Mexico, actually in like fourth grade to Cancun. I remember going to Chichen Itza, and I think on the tour bus they were like, "Yeah, like the ancient Mayans like invented zero," but I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I'm blanking on exactly which
There
culture,
you go, you and your
this has
memory,
been
you
pinned
and your
on, but
memory. It's a darn
but
shame.
yeah. I feel like it's also one of these things too though where like, it's only up to like written history that we can know, who had this idea of zero. And also like, we don't have a lot of written history, so
It
I
was
think it's
Hercules. It was
nailing
Hercules
it
because they
down to
sing that
one
song
one
"Zero to
place is hard.
Hero."
True. Yeah. The historically accurate Disney's Hercules.
Yeah, all the muses. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's really good. I mean, like it's interesting because it's like I obviously like know all of these things, I kind of as they occur and kind of following your story, but it's kind of cool to like hear your side of it, I guess, as you experience it. So it's very cool. I will say, like, just to see like where its origins were to like where it's kind of come to fruition now. Like it's a very interesting story, and like I think like for people just to call you like, oh, like you're the Harvard girl, like that's so sick. Like it's true, but it's also like it doesn't really do justice to I think like the sacrifice, but then also like the intentionality behind like the journey up to now.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, I think, it's I don't know. In some sense, it also gives too much credit because I think that there's kind of this weird culture around Harvard in particular. But I think like I don't know that I've had to sacrifice more than like people in other schools or in other professions. Like I don't think it's I don't know. I almost feel like there's just too much of a weird cultural buildup around it. So yeah, I think being called the Harvard girl is wrong for many reasons.
Sure. Sure. Okay. Well, at the end of every podcast, I always ask the guests, like, is there anything that we can pray for you for? Any ongoing, like, kind of trial or any person in particular?
Um, yeah, pray I get a postdoc position so I can keep doing it.
I like it. I like it. If we pray right now, just in the present.
Yeah, sure.
All right. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, thank you for your providence over our lives. Thank you for the gift of the intellect, for guiding us as we try to discover more and more of the truth that you instantiated. Please, in a special way, be with Amanda and help guide her and guide the people making the decisions into the right postdoc assignment. If it's your will, please help Amanda and Neven get the same postdoc. That'd be awesome. And just continue to bless us and help us to be ever more attentive of your guiding hand and your goodness in our lives. Amen. Yeah, Father, Son,
Amen.
Holy Spirit. Amen. My sister, my big sister.
Aw,
Thanks so much.
my baby brother.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
little bro.
It's been an honor.
Aw, thanks.